I'm R. Sucharita, Government Degree College, Karatabad, Hyderabad, Department of English. So, we are going to do the next part of The Kite Maker, which is written by Ruskin Bond. So, in the last video, we have seen that Mahmood he presented to the Nawab a musical kite, and that musical kite, it sounded like a violin when it rose into the air. As it was rising into the air, it was making the sound of a violin. Okay, so from there we'll continue. It is page number 111 in your textbooks and 112. So those were leisurely, more spacious days. But the Nawab had died years ago, and his descendants were almost as poor as Mahmud himself. Kite makers, like poets, once had their patrons, but no one knew Mahmud simply because there were too many people in the gully and they could not be bothered with their neighbors. And those days, they were not like the present days. They were very leisurely days and they were more spacious days. There was lot of time in those days because there were no electronic gadgets. But the Nawab, he had died years ago. And then the descendants of the Nawab were almost poor as Mahmud himself. So the descendants of the Nawab, they were very poor, like this Mahmud. So kite makers, like poets, once they had their patrons. Patrons means a person who gives support financially or other support also they will be giving these patrons. In other words, we may call them as backers or they are known as the sponsors. Okay, the one who sponsors the program. Okay, so like that they were patrons in those days, patron. But one knew Mahmud simply because there were too many people in the gully. So where Mahmud lived, there were many people who were living in that gully and they could not be bothered with their neighbors, and they were never bothered with their neighbors. Okay, so the children who so when Mahmud was younger and fallen sick, everyone in the neighborhood had come to ask for his health. But now, when his days were drawing to a close, no one visited him. Most of his old friends were dead, and his sons had grown up. One was working in a local garage, and the other, who was in Pakistan at the time of the partition, had not been able to rejoin his relatives. Now, when Mahmud was younger and when he fell sick, when he was very young in his days, and when he got illness or if he had fallen sick, everyone in the neighborhood, they would come and ask for his health. How are you, Mahmud? How are you, Mahmud? So, like that, they would come and ask. But now, when his days were drawing to a close, that means now he became very, very old, and his days it became very close, or that is of his departure. So, no one visited him as he became very old, and most of his old friends, they were also dead. They were no more, and his sons had grown up. So he had two sons and they also they became adults, they have grown up, and one was working in a local garage. So one son, he was working in the same local garage, and the other who was in Pakistan, and the other son, he moved to Pakistan at the time of partition. So when India was after independence, there was a partition. There was a partition, that is, from India, Pakistan was separated or it was parted. They told that they needed a separate state, a separate country for them. So, like that, actually, Pakistan was also included in India. But later on, what happened? Pakistan, it was parted. So, at that time of partition, Mahmud's other son, that is the second son, he went to Pakistan, had not been able to rejoin his relatives, and he was unable to rejoin his relatives, because he became very old. So the children who had bought kites from him 10 years ago were now grown men struggling for a living. They did not have time for the old man and his memories. They had grown up in a swiftly changing and competitive world, and they looked at the old kite maker and the banyan tree with the same indifference. So the children who had bought kites from Mahmud 10 years ago, those now they are grown up. So they were very young children when they came and when they bought these kites from Mahmud. And now they became adults and now they are struggling for their livelihood, for their living. And they did not have time for the old man to come and see him and his memories, to come and speak with him. So they had grown up in a swiftly changing and competitive world. Now this is a very swift changing and competitive world where people don't have time to speak to each other, to talk to each other. And they looked at the old kite maker and the banyan tree with the same indifference. And they looked at the old kite maker and they were comparing the kite maker with the old banyan tree. So now you can see this on the slide. This is the old banyan tree with the same indifference. Both were taken for granted. That is the old man, here you can see the old man, grandfather, that is Mahmud. And then permanent fixtures that were of no concern to the raucous, sweating mass of humanity that surrounded them. No longer did people gather under the banyan tree to discuss their problems and their plans. Only in the summer months did a few seek shelter from the fierce sun. So, permanent fixtures that were of no concern to the raucous. Raucous means very harsh or loud noise, is called as raucous. Okay, so raucous, you can see that loud noise and the harsh sweating mass of this humanity which was surrounded by Mahmud. No longer did people gather under the banyan tree. So nobody came to this banyan tree. Actually, they would come under this banyan tree and they would talk and they would discuss their problems and their plans, the good and the bad which they are undergoing. They would come and they would speak here under the banyan tree. Only in the summer months did a few seek shelter from the fierce sun. But now only few people they are coming to this banyan tree, and especially to be escaped from the fierce sun. They are coming to take shelter. Okay, so but there was the boy, his grandson. So this is his grandson. It was good that Mahmud's son worked close by, for it gladdened the old man's heart to watch the small boy at play in the winter sunshine, growing under his eyes like a young and well nourished sapling, putting forth new leaves each day. There is a great affinity between trees and men. We grow at much the same pace if we are not hurt or starved or cut down. In our youth, we are resplendent creatures, and in our declining years, we stoop a little. We remember, we stretch our brittle limbs in the sun, and then with a sigh, we shed our last leaves. we shed our last leaves. So this boy, that is grandson is Ali. Ali is Mahmud's grandson. It was good that Mahmud's grandson, that is, and his son, Mahmud's son, he worked very close by. He was working in a local garage and then growing under his eyes like a young, well nourished sapling. So, this that is Ali, his grandson, he was like a well nourished sapling. He was very young and he was putting forth new leaves each day. And there is a great affinity between trees and men. Affinity means it is similarity. There is a great similarity between trees and men, that is the people. We grow at much the same pace if we are not hurt or starved or cut down. In our youth, we are resplendent creatures. That means when we are young, we are compared to resplendent creatures. That means we are very brilliant and we are dazzling. And in our declining years, as the years pass by, we stoop a little. That means we bend a little. We remember, we stretch our brittle limbs. Don't know when our these limbs they are going to become weak in the sun, and then with a sigh we shed our last leaves. So we come to an end and we will be shedding our last leaves. That means we will be going into the grave. So Mahmud was like the banyan, his hands gnarled and twisted like the roots of the ancient tree. And how was Mahmud? He is compared to this banyan tree. His hands, they were gnarled. That means how the roots are gnarled here, how they are in a twisting manner and twisted like the roots of the ancient tree. The ancient tree is the old tree. So Mahmud was also compared to this ancient old banyan tree because he became very old. Ali was like the young mimosa, planted at the end of the courtyard, and Mahmud's grandson Ali, he is compared with this mimosa plant. So you know, mimosa plant is a touch me not plant. So once you touch, its leaves will be closed. So Ali was compared with this mimosa plant at the end of the courtyard. So in 2 years, both and the tree would acquire the strength and confidence of their early youth. The voices in the street grew fainter, and Mahmud wondered if he was going to fall asleep and dream. So Mahmud, he wondered. Now he is going to fall asleep, and he once he falls asleep, and again he is going to dream, as he so often did, of a kite so beautiful and powerful that it would resemble the great white bird of the Hindus. Now he is dreaming of a very great kite, that is the white bird of the Hindus, which is called as the Garuda. So you can see the Garuda, okay, here. So this is the great white bird of the Hindus, which is called as Garuda, and this is God Vishnu's famous steed. He would like to make a wonderful new kite for little Ali, and Mahmud dreamed that he wants to make a very beautiful, wonderful kite for his little grandson Ali. He had nothing else to leave the boy. So he was so poor, like the Nawab's descendants. Now they don't have any permanent assets, or they don't have any money in the bank account. So that is why he had so much love on his little Ali, that is grandson, that he wants to leave something for his grandson. So that something is he wants to make a wonderful kite, a new kite, and leave it for the boy. So he heard Ali's voice in the distance, but he did not realize that the boy was calling him. So now this grandfather, he was able to hear the little voice of his grandson, that is Ali. Ali was calling him, but he did not realize the voice seemed to come from very far away. So he thought that he is hearing, but he thought that he is hearing from a very long distance. So Ali was at the courtyard door asking if his mother had as yet returned from the bazaar. Now Ali came to the door where grandfather was sitting, and he was asking whether mother did mummy return from the bazaar. When Mahmud did not answer, so when Ali was questioning to his grandfather, Mahmoud did not answer. The boy came forward, repeating his question. Again, Ali he came forward to the grandfather, and he was repeating the question. Did mummy return from the bazaar? So the sunlight was slanting across the old man's head, and a small white butterfly rested on his flowing beard. So you can see the flowing beard, and this is the white butterfly. It came and it rested on the flowing beard of Mahmud. Okay, so Mahmud he was very silent, and when Ali put his small brown hand on the old man's shoulder, he met with no response. Now, what did Ali do? He kept his hand on this old man's shoulder, but Mahmud he could not respond. The boy heard a faint sound like the rubbing of marbles in his pocket. So once we keep the marbles in our pocket, and if we rub on it, how do we get we will be listening to, or we will be hearing to a faint sound. So it was compared to that faint sound, that is the rubbing of the marbles in his pocket. So Ali heard that sound, and suddenly he was very much afraid. Ali turned and moved to the door, and then ran down the street shouting for his mother. Now Ali could understand what had happened, and he became very frightened, and he came out of that door, and he was running toward the street, and he was shouting for his mother. The butterfly left the old man's beard. So the butterfly it came, and it was resting on the old man's beard. Now it flew away to the mimosa tree, and a sudden gust of wind caught the torn kite and lifted in the air. So after this, when the bird flew to the mimosa tree, suddenly there was a sudden gust of wind. Okay, very strong or very sudden strong blast of wind was caught, and then the caught the torn kite. Okay, and this stone kite it was lifted it in the air, carrying it far above the struggling city into the blind blue sky where it is not visible. Now we cannot see. So that was the importance of that old great man. So when he was on this earth, that is when he was living, what did he do? He was a poor man. So though he was a poor man, struggling and earning for his livelihood, he was faithful and he was loyal. And what did he do? He developed his skill of kite making. And what did he do? He became, by practicing it every day, he became an expert kite maker. He was such an expert kite maker that he made beautiful kites even for those kings and nawabs. So like that he became popular and he became well known. And we can also observe his great love for his grandson, that is Ali. So this is the last part of the story, and thank you. We have completed The Kite Maker, which is written by Ruskin Bond.